The mission was supposed to be simple, just another quiet shift in the dark silence beyond Mars. Captain Reed had done this many times before. His ship, the Aurora Scout, drifted smoothly along its assigned path, scanning for cosmic signals and mineral traces. It was a lonely job, but he didn't mind the solitude. Out there, far from Earth, he could think. He often recorded voice notes, talking about how small yet powerful humanity was, how fragile life seemed against the endless stretch of stars. Then, one night, something changed. The instruments began to flicker, showing strange readings, patterns of light that didn't match any known star or planet. At first, he thought it was just interference, but then the lights outside shifted, forming something that almost looked deliberate, like a message written in motion. He leaned closer to the window, confused but curious, unaware that it would be the last transmission Earth would ever receive from him. Moments later, his signal vanished. On Earth, the monitoring team tried to reconnect, sending command after command. No response. For hours, they watched his last coordinates, hoping the feed would return. But instead, silence filled the channel. The ship had disappeared from every radar like it had been swallowed by space itself. Days later, a rescue probe finally located the Aurora Scout, floating empty, its systems still running, its lights dim. The cabin door was sealed, the oxygen still stable, and every control untouched. Yet the pilot's seat was empty. Investigators studied the footage from the ship's onboard cameras, but the final minutes were corrupted. The only clear image was a burst of white light and a single circular burn across the hull, smooth, precise, and unlike any known weapon mark. Some said it was plasma discharge. Others whispered about first contact. The official report labeled it as unexplained spatial interference, but those who read the details knew better. Something had taken him. For the next several days, the scientific community buzzed with theories. Some believed it was an accident, others claimed alien involvement. But deep within the Space Command, a secret message was being decoded, one faint transmission that had survived the corruption. It wasn't words, but a sound, soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. It lasted only a few seconds before cutting off completely. And then nothing more. Back on Earth, Captain Reed's family refused to give up hope. They believed he was alive somewhere, waiting. And perhaps they were right. Because far beyond the red dust of Mars, in a place no human had ever seen, a man was waking up in a cold, metallic chamber, surrounded by shadows that didn't belong to any world he knew. The real story of what happened to him, how he vanished, and what he would face next, was only just beginning. When he opened his eyes, he wasn't sure if he was dreaming or dead. The ceiling above him shimmered like liquid metal, rippling with a faint blue glow. The air felt heavy, almost alive, and each breath burned slightly as if it wasn't meant for human lungs. He tried to move, but his arms wouldn't respond. They were bound, not with chains, but with strands of light that tightened whenever he struggled. His heart pounded as he looked around. The walls weren't solid. They shifted, humming softly like they were breathing too. Then he saw them. Shapes in the haze, tall and lean, their movements too smooth to be natural. Their eyes, or what he thought were eyes, glowed faintly, and they stared at him not with curiosity but with purpose. They didn't speak, yet their presence filled the room like a storm about to break. Then it began, not sound, but sensation, a pressure against his thoughts, gentle at first, then stronger. He could feel something trying to enter his mind, not through words, but through emotions, images, memories. They weren't asking him questions. They were searching, digging. He could feel them pulling at his memories of Earth, flashes of blue skies, the hum of engines, laughter, training sessions, moments of fear and courage. They were studying it all, extracting meaning like data. It was the strangest kind of pain, not physical but mental, as if his thoughts were being peeled apart. He tried to push back, to think of nothing, but their presence was too strong, and then he felt it. They wanted something specific. Not just information about ships or weapons, but something deeper. They wanted to understand what made humans resist. What gave them strength when logic said surrender was the only option. He could feel their confusion, their frustration, like distant thunder in his skull. To them, emotions were weakness. To him, they were survival. That difference, the thing they couldn't grasp, was what kept him fighting even as they pressed harder into his mind. He could hear fragments of their thoughts now, pieces of alien communication flickering through him, images of Earth cities, armies, oceans. It was as if they were mapping the planet through his memories. He clenched his teeth, forcing himself to focus on one image, his home, the faces of people he loved, and the reason he had joined the mission in the first place, to protect humanity's future. The more he focused on that, the harder it became for them to reach him. The room's light pulsed faster, almost like it was reacting to his resistance. The being stepped closer, confused by his defiance. They had taken many creatures before, studied countless minds, but never one that fought back like this. For the first time, they hesitated. And in that hesitation, something inside him sparked, a quiet realization. They were powerful, but not invincible. They could break his body, but not his will. And that was something they would soon learn the hard way. The room darkened as the strange light around him began to pulse faster, matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. The air thickened. And once again, that invisible pressure pressed against his mind. He tried to steady his breathing, but this time it was different. The aliens were no longer just searching through his thoughts, they were rearranging them. Suddenly, he wasn't in the metallic chamber anymore. He stood in the middle of a place that felt too real to be imagined, a field under a red sky filled with smoke. The sound of distant cries echoed in his ears. He turned and saw faces he knew, friends, crewmates, people from training, but their eyes were filled with fear and anger. They blamed him, shouted his name, accused him of leaving them behind. The pain in their voices cut deeper than any physical wound. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head as the scene burned brighter around him. The aliens were watching closely, studying his reaction. But instead of breaking, something inside him began to shift. He looked up, staring at the illusion, and a faint smile appeared on his face. He realized what they were doing. They thought that by showing him pain and guilt, they could destroy his mind from the inside out. They thought humans ran from emotion, that fear was their weakness. But they were wrong. Pain didn't weaken people. It reminded them that they cared, that they were alive. He took a deep breath and let the vision play out. Every scream, every twisted image, they couldn't hurt him unless he believed them. He knew the truth. His memories weren't perfect, but they were his. The aliens might have the power to copy what they saw, but they couldn't understand the meaning behind it. They didn't know what love felt like when you'd lost everything, or what hope meant when you had no reason left to fight. They couldn't feel the difference between sorrow and strength. The images began to flicker. The aliens grew impatient, pushing harder, showing new scenes, his ship exploding, his home planet burning, his family fading into ash. Yet, through it all, he stayed calm. "You're wasting your time," he whispered softly. His voice carried through the mental connection, and the room's vibration changed slightly, like a ripple of confusion from his captors. They couldn't understand why he wasn't afraid anymore. He smiled again, quietly this time. "You don't get it, do you?" he thought to them. "Fear isn't what drives us. It's what teaches us." He could feel their confusion growing, their energy pulsing faster, trying to find a new way to reach him. But they couldn't, because they didn't understand the thing they were trying to destroy. For the first time, Reed realized that emotion, the very thing they thought was weakness, was humanity's greatest defense. And as the light around him dimmed, he sat silently, knowing he had just passed their first test. The air inside the chamber buzzed with silent tension. The aliens stood around him, their eyes glowing like cold stars, ready to invade his mind once again. But this time, Reed wasn't the same man they had captured. He understood now how they worked, how they fed on logic, how they relied on control. So when they reached into his thoughts, he did something they never expected. He fought back, not with anger or defiance, but with stories. He filled his mind with the sound of laughter, real laughter, the kind that came from friends around a campfire after long days in space. He remembered the songs his team used to play during training, songs that made even the toughest missions feel lighter. He thought about the smell of rain on Earth, the warmth of sunlight through a window, the feeling of holding something fragile and knowing it mattered. These memories weren't weapons, but they carried a force stronger than anything the aliens understood. As his emotions spread through the psychic link, the aliens hesitated. Their machines began to flicker, their lights pulsing unevenly. They could process information, decode language, even read thoughts, but emotion was chaos to them. They couldn't classify it. They couldn't control it. Every time they tried to push deeper, he met them with another wave, images of human courage, of people standing in storms, of parents protecting their children, of soldiers refusing to give up even when all hope was gone. The air grew heavy with tension. One of the aliens stepped back, its body twitching as if trying to break free from something unseen. Reed could feel them struggling, their minds recoiling from the flood of sensations they couldn't comprehend. For the first time, they were the ones overwhelmed. He felt their confusion pressing against his mind, trying to understand why he wasn't collapsing like the others they had studied before. But he didn't stop. He pushed harder. He showed them faces of heroes, those who had fallen, those who had endured. He remembered humanity's music, the kind that made hearts ache and eyes tear up without knowing why. The sound of violins, the beat of drums, the whispers of choirs, all of it filled his thoughts until it became a storm. The aliens' machines sparked and dimmed, unable to filter the flood of raw emotion. Reed sat still in the center of it all, eyes closed, a faint smile on his lips. The interrogation room trembled slightly as if the very air was rejecting what the aliens were doing. In their world of logic, control, and cold precision, a single human heart had just turned into chaos. And as the energy around him began to fade, Reed opened his eyes and whispered softly, "Now you understand. We don't break that easily." For the first time since his capture, the alien stepped back, not out of curiosity, but out of fear. The room had gone quiet after his last outburst of emotion. The machines that once hummed with alien precision now flickered uncertainly, their blue light dimming in rhythm with the confused thoughts that surrounded him. Reed sat still, breathing slowly, every sense alert. He could feel their unease, the silent communication moving among the beings around him. But one of them was different. Smaller than the rest, its eyes didn't glow with the same harsh light. It stood slightly behind the others, not out of weakness, but as if it didn't fully belong. When their leader sent another pulse of mental energy toward Reed, this smaller one hesitated. It didn't move. It just watched him. Reed noticed it immediately. He could sense the difference. The way its gaze wasn't filled with hatred or command, but something else. Curiosity, maybe even confusion. As the others pressed their cold thoughts into his mind, he turned his attention toward the quiet observer and whispered softly, "You can feel it too, can't you?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the silence like a spark in dry air. The alien froze. Its body shifted slightly, and for a brief second, the bright veins of light across its form flickered a softer tone. The others didn't seem to notice. They were too busy trying to understand why this human's mind hadn't shattered yet. But that one alien, the hesitant one, was staring straight at him now. And Reed saw it clearly in its expression. Doubt. Not fear, not anger, doubt. It was the first crack in their control. He took a slow breath and leaned forward just a little, his voice calm and steady. "You're not like them," he said. "You can feel it, what it means to care." The air between them seemed to change. The cold metallic walls, once lifeless and sterile, felt a little warmer. It wasn't much, but enough to make Reed's heart quicken. For the first time since his capture, he wasn't just defending himself, he was reaching someone. The alien didn't respond, but its breathing, or whatever their kind did to imitate it, grew uneven. Its light dimmed and a soft hum replaced the sharp mechanical tone of the room. Reed didn't need words to know what was happening. Something inside that creature was awakening, something the others had buried long ago. Empathy. The others finally noticed its hesitation. A sharp sound echoed, and the smaller alien flinched back as if struck by an invisible force. But even then, its eyes didn't leave Reed. He met its gaze and whispered again, "That's what makes us human. We feel, we forgive." We change. For a long moment, no one moved. The machines around them quieted, and the cold glow of the room faded into a strange, uncertain calm. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't power, strength, or science. It was compassion. And for the first time, an alien had felt it. The days, or what felt like days, bled together inside the endless metallic chamber. Reed could no longer tell if he was awake or dreaming. The walls shifted shape, the light changed color, and the whispers in his mind grew louder. The alien leaders had decided he was too strong, too stubborn. They couldn't understand why his mind refused to bend, so they changed their strategy. They took away sound, light, and warmth, leaving him in a darkness so complete that even his heartbeat felt distant. Time lost meaning. His own thoughts echoed back at him like ghosts. That was their plan, to make him question what was real. When they finally returned, they brought illusions with them. The air shimmered, and before his eyes, he saw Earth burning. Cities in flames, oceans boiling, and familiar faces crying out in terror. He reached forward instinctively, shouting, but his hands touched nothing but cold air. He knew they were trying to trick him, yet the pain in his chest was real. They wanted to use love as a weapon. They wanted to make him believe that resisting had caused the end of everything he loved. The images were vivid, too real. The smell of smoke, the crack of thunder, the silent screams. Reed dropped to his knees. His strength began to fade, but his heart refused to die. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "If this is real, then I'll remember them with honor. If it's not, you can't take them from me." The alien's mental pressure tightened around him, like invisible chains pulling at his memories. But instead of fighting with anger, he focused on the smallest things, the laughter of his crew, the warmth of sunlight on his face, the sound of rain on metal. These were not illusions. They were truths. The aliens grew frustrated. Their energy pulsed brighter, and one of the leaders slammed its hand against the wall, sending waves of psychic pain through his mind. He gritted his teeth but didn't scream. They could break his body, but not his will. "You can't break what refuses to hate," he muttered, his voice trembling but unbroken. The words echoed in the chamber, soft yet defiant. For the first time, the aliens faltered. They didn't understand. Every being they had conquered before had fallen to fear or rage. But this human, this fragile creature, kept standing because of something they couldn't measure or destroy. His mind was scarred, yes, but his heart was still burning with something far stronger than pain. They could take away his light, his comfort, even his hope. But they couldn't take away his humanity. As the illusions faded and silence returned, the leaders realized something terrifying. The human wasn't the one at the breaking point. They were. Reed lay weak in the glowing chamber, his mind heavy from the endless mental assaults. But amid the pain, something strange began to happen. One of the aliens, the smaller one that had once watched him with hesitation, lingered longer than the others. Its gaze wasn't cold like the rest. There was a flicker of something uncertain, curiosity maybe, or pity. Reed couldn't tell, but he felt it. Whenever the others increased the neural pulses, the smaller alien's light dimmed, as if in quiet protest. Then, during one of the sessions, he felt a difference. The energy wasn't as sharp, the pain not as deep. He opened his eyes and saw the alien standing slightly apart from the others, its tendrils glowing a faint blue instead of red. It was helping him. At first, he thought it was a trick. But then he felt a thought, not a voice but a presence, enter his mind gently, like a calm wave. It wasn't a command or a demand. It was a question, a silent curiosity. Reed understood the alien wanted to see, so he let it in. He opened his memories, not the ones of war or fear, but of life, of home, of oceans stretching to the horizon, of laughter echoing in crowded streets, of children chasing kites under a golden sun. He showed it everything that made humanity more than survival, what made it alive. The alien froze. Through the psychic link, Reed felt its confusion shift into awe. For the first time, it felt what humans called warmth, not heat but emotion. It was overwhelmed by sensations it had no words for: joy, nostalgia, tenderness. Its species had never needed such things. They were a collective mind, built on logic and obedience. But now, standing before this fragile creature, it began to question everything it had been taught. The next time the others initiated a pulse, the alien altered the controls. The energy weakened. Reed noticed. His body felt lighter, his mind clearer. Their eyes met, and for a second, no words or thoughts were needed. It understood. The alien began secretly changing the machine's rhythm each time, giving him small windows of relief. Once, when no one was watching, it reached out and touched one of the restraints. A soft click echoed, and his right arm loosened. It wasn't a full escape, but it was hope. In that single act, Reed realized something powerful. Humanity didn't just survive, it inspired. Even in a place meant to crush his spirit, even among his enemies, he had sparked compassion. It wasn't rebellion in the traditional sense. It was the birth of something greater, a silent awakening inside a being who had never known emotion. And as the alien turned away, pretending nothing had happened, Reed smiled faintly. They had tried to break the human mind, but instead, the human heart had begun to change theirs. Reed waited for the right moment, his breath steady despite the exhaustion creeping through his body. The smaller alien, the one who had shown compassion, stood silently near the control panel, pretending to follow orders. Around them, the others prepared to begin another neural scan, eager to tear deeper into the human mind that refused to break. Reed could feel the familiar hum of the machine starting up, a faint vibration that always preceded pain. But this time something was different. The curious alien turned slightly toward him, and for the first time, Reed felt no fear, only understanding. He focused his thoughts, drawing on every memory he had ever held dear: laughter around campfires, the sound of rain against glass, the calm of a sunrise after a long night. Every moment carried emotion, pure, human, unstoppable. As the machine connected to his mind, he didn't resist it. He pushed back with it. He sent his memories through their scanners like a tidal wave of light, forcing every system to feel what he felt. The machine began to overload. Warnings flared across the control panels, flashing symbols of danger. The interrogators tried to cut the link, but it was too late. Human emotion, grief, love, courage, all of it mixed into a force the machine was never designed to handle. The lights above flickered, then burst. The metallic room filled with blinding sparks as power surged through the neural conduits. Reed tore free from the loosened restraints, his body trembling but determined. The air smelled of smoke and burning circuits. The smaller alien stood still, its glowing eyes locked on him, unmoving. Around them, chaos erupted. Alarms screamed, walls trembled, and the ground shook with every pulse. He stumbled forward, half running, half falling toward the door. The alien reached out, not to stop him, but to open the path. For a brief moment, their eyes met again. In that silent exchange, no words were needed. Reed saw gratitude in its gaze and something even deeper, respect. The alien had chosen its side, not in rebellion against its kind, but in recognition of what it had seen inside him. Humanity's light. As he slipped into the corridor, the heavy doors sealed behind him with a metallic thud. He could still hear the distant cries of confusion as the station's systems failed one by one. The corridors stretched endlessly, glowing red from emergency lights. He staggered forward, clutching his side, using the walls to keep balance. The ship groaned like a wounded creature, but he didn't stop. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to move. Behind him, the smaller alien watched from the control room, surrounded by the collapsing chaos it had helped create. Reed reached a docking hatch and slammed the release. A gust of air roared past him as the chamber opened. He climbed into an escape pod, barely able to breathe. As the hatch closed and the pod launched into the void, he looked back one last time. Through the narrow viewport, he saw the alien's faint blue glow fading in the distance. It hadn't followed, but it didn't need to. It had already chosen humanity, in spirit if not in body. Weeks passed before Earth's scanners detected the faint signal drifting near the moon. It was weak, almost buried in cosmic noise, just a broken beacon pulsing every few seconds. When recovery teams reached the source, they found a damaged escape pod, its surface scorched and cracked from radiation. Inside, through the frosted glass, lay Reed. His body was still, wrapped in the emergency restraints, and for a terrifying moment they thought he was gone. But when they opened the hatch, a faint breath escaped his lips, a sign of life against all odds. The medics rushed him back to Earth, unsure what horrors he had faced, only that he had somehow survived what no human ever had. For days he remained unconscious in the medical wing, surrounded by silence and curiosity. Scientists and officers gathered outside his room whispering theories. Some believed he had been abducted by a new species. Others said the mission had broken him, that he was hallucinating. But when Reed finally opened his eyes, the first thing he said silenced the room. His voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "They tried to break my mind. Instead, they learned what it means to be human." No one dared to speak after that. Even the heart monitors seemed to slow down, as if the machines themselves were listening. Command questioned him gently at first, then formally. They wanted to know what he had seen, how he had escaped, and who or what had helped him. But Reed spoke little. He only said that the enemy had no understanding of human emotion, no grasp of the strength that comes from empathy and love. He explained how they had used pain as a weapon but failed to realize that pain could also create resilience. Every answer he gave was calm, but his eyes carried something deep, an understanding of a truth no one else could fully imagine. His report was eventually classified. High Command locked it away, marking it as restricted. But secrets never stay buried forever. The doctors who treated him, the soldiers who helped recover his pod, and the engineers who examined its damaged hull all whispered the same story. That the human mind had stood against an alien force and won, not through violence but through spirit. As weeks turned into months, the tale spread quietly through the stations and colonies. Pilots told it before long missions. Teachers repeated it to inspire students. Even among scientists, it became something more than rumor. A reminder that courage isn't measured by strength or weapons, but by the heart's refusal to surrender. Reed, now fully recovered, often stood near the observation deck at night watching the stars. Somewhere out there, he knew, an alien being had learned what it truly meant to feel, and as he gazed into the endless dark, a faint smile touched his lips, not of pride, but of peace. Humanity had been tested, and it had endured. Years passed after the mysterious mission of Captain Reed, and his story became part of quiet military archives and whispered legends among spacefarers. People remembered him as the man who faced the unknown and came back changed, but few knew the full truth. Earth's expansion continued, new stations were built beyond Mars, and humanity's presence in the stars grew stronger. Yet somewhere in the deep silence between galaxies, something unexpected began to stir. One morning, scientists at the Lunar Deep Space Listening Array detected a faint transmission, soft, patterned, and hauntingly familiar. It wasn't a distress signal, nor did it match any known alien or human communication format. It was simple, rhythmic, almost like music. At first, they thought it was interference or a random echo. But as they decoded it further, chills ran through the entire command room. The signal wasn't random at all, it was a melody, a soft human lullaby, one that Captain Reed was known to hum quietly during long missions, something he once said reminded him of home. The scientists exchanged uneasy glances. The frequency came from deep beyond known space, far past the region where Reed's ship had vanished years ago. No human craft had ever reached that far. Yet here it was, a song from Earth played back by something not human. When the message was made public, debates broke out across the world. Some believed it was a trick, an echo of humanity's old transmissions reflected back through space. Others thought it was a gesture, an alien way of saying they had learned, or perhaps remembered. But those who knew Captain Reed's story understood its meaning instantly. The lullaby was more than a sound. It was a message. A reminder that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't aggression, but compassion. That even in the hands of creatures who once sought to destroy him, his humanity had left a mark strong enough to echo across light years. Governments quietly honored Reed's memory. The Reed Protocol was introduced in the Space Alliance Charter, a rule that first contact should always begin with understanding before conflict. The melody itself was stored in the galactic archive, and children growing up on distant colonies learned to hum it as a song of peace. It became a symbol of what humans truly stood for, not domination, but resilience born from empathy. Years later, when a new generation of explorers prepared to travel beyond known space, they carried that same lullaby encoded in their ship's systems, not as a defense signal, but as a greeting, a way to say, "We remember." Somewhere out there, among the cold stars, something had remembered too. And though no one ever found proof of the beings that once captured him, one truth remained clear. The universe had learned from a single human heart that refused to break. And that, more than anything, became humanity's lasting legacy among the stars.